What's up with the surge in socialism? Check this out.
This place got a new face, killing Joe's face. Got a Joe thing, chilling in a new phase. Blue space in a new place, what did he say? He done tic-tac, feeling like a true play. Step back and I never say no. I was winning over there, now I'm running out of flow. Got a feeling in the air, but I'm feeling kinda low. Got a ceiling over here, and I think it's gonna blow. Hey, this place got a new face, killing Joe's face.
Oh, damn. Yes. In case you didn't know, it's time for another show. I'm Aquarian OG. You should get to know me. We're up in the Chillington, the SS Chillington. Chilling. That's about all I got to say about that. Anyway, why are so many people becoming socialists? If you haven't noticed that there has been a movement towards socialism, there is a giant reason towards that. And part of that is connected to the last video with the laborers. The labor unions. And the labor union rises in big companies that don't have them or was fighting against them or, whatever have you. So, without further ado, I got this video from Second Thought because they got some good stuff going on. So we like watching their stuff. And let's get it on. If you haven't liked and subscribed to the channel, please help out with the growth. Because my goal is hit that 1,000 so we can go further and do good things around this piece of internet. I want to help people out and stuff like that. Be well off myself, but help people out along the way. So they, whatever. Case pending. Let's go.
If you clicked on this video, I'm going to assume you're at least somewhat interested, whether out of curiosity or disgust, in why so many young people seem to be drawn to socialism.
You could say that.
Before we tackle this topic, let me just offer a brief disclaimer. This video is mainly for those who either don't know much about socialism and are interested in learning more, or who have a negative opinion of socialism and want to understand why their kids are adopting such a clearly evil ideology. Full disclosure, I am a...
You know what? I feel the same way as this lady right here. Where is that picture at? Where is she at?
Socialism and are interested in learning more, or who have a negative opinion of socialism and want to understand why their kids are adopting such a clearly...
Taxation is theft. Why do we get taxed on so much stuff after you already took money out of our paycheck, and then you gotta take money for whatever initials you want to call something? I don't even know what half that stuff even does or care because they don't see it. What is all this? Then when you go to buy something, it gets taxed. Then when you go to sell something, you might have tax. It's what the hell? And then when you own something, say you own a house, you got tax. You get a service, you got tax. You can't even fix your stuff that you're paying tax on that you had to pay tax on. You got to pay tax on that. That's taxing.
Evil ideology. Full disclosure, I am a socialist. Many of the people who watch this channel are socialists. If you reach the end of this video and would still like to learn more, consider leaving a comment, ask a question. As long as you're operating in good faith, people will answer them honestly and with understanding. As one final disclaimer, this video is not an attack on anyone who does not identify as socialist. Quite the contrary. It's an invitation to engage with good people who want the same things you do. Economic security, opportunity, universal rights, and a better life for their children. Some of what...
Dude got the perfect gray mini fro. That thing is gorgeous.
What I'm going to say may just sound like a bunch of complaining. But bear with me. Socialism is, at its heart, a philosophy of hope and of positive action. With that out of the way, let's dive in. I think we should start with some definitions. A lot of people hear the word socialist and assume we're some radical branch of the Democrats.
Radical branch. He didn't even have to say Democrats. All he had to do was say radical branch. He could have left it at that. Democrats, yeah, more specific, but there's a lot of one Republican side too in socialism because they see, socialism needs more than one system to work. So does capitalism, all this other stuff, all that stuff. You need more than one system to work.
That is not the case. In fact, the most outspoken critics of Democrats are the Socialists. It's immensely frustrating to us when liberals yell about kids in cages for 4 years, and then suddenly when a Democrat is elected, they change their tune. Well, actually...
Biden defends policy on unaccompanied migrant children. How do you defend a policy? I don't understand. Maybe I'm just maybe it's just a title. I don't know. But how do you defend this? Like, how does this even happen other than a dirty government? Why did they separate them from the parents? Why was that a good idea? Why are these kids not reunited with their families? Why do you not understand how much anger comes from people who grew up with this as part of their childhood? Why is that so hard to understand? Like, what the fuck do y'all gotta get? Ain't nobody up in there got their head up. Everybody got their head down. Like, come on now. Pod 2. That's jail. He got them fenced up. Like, these is kids, yo. These governments be just... Y'all wonder why people start revolting against your old asses. You can't even call this racism. This is just wrong. That's how immigrants get treated.
Well, actually, they're temporary unaccompanied migrant housing facilities. That's not to let conservatives off the hook, of course.
Speaking of housing facility, about 5 years past being needed. I tell you who need to be in a housing facility. This dude right here. This man has a handler. You wonder why people talking about who runs the White House? Because he ain't even in his right mind. Like, we didn't see the whole invisible handshakes and who you talking to, ain't nobody standing there. What are you doing, dude? Other than just allowing people to make more ridiculous policies and whatever the hell else, and you just...
Temporary unaccompanied migrant housing facilities. That's not to let conservatives off the hook, of course. The suicidal free market rhetoric of the modern American right is destroying the possibility of financial stability for anyone under the age of 50. We believe both Democrats and Republicans are right-wing parties. Right-wing meaning in support of the system that is capitalism. Socialists want to build a society beyond capitalism. One that...
Because both of them being the same party is exactly my thought. This red and this blue, that ain't nothing. That's just to see who can steer the crowd the right way. What we need to do is cut it down the middle and say, the hell with both of y'all over here. Make our own candidate and boost our own candidate. Because these two motherfuckers, and I ain't talking about the individual persons that has a name like Trump and Biden. I'm talking about the parties as a whole. The red and the blue. The Crips and the Bloods. This is the real gang right here. They're just playing voters like y'all stupid. And I'm saying y'all because I quit voting. There ain't nobody up there I want to vote for, so you don't get my vote. I'm not giving it to you. I don't give a damn what kind of public list that you want to illegally post, because that shit's illegal. By the way, Biden. Oh, we'll make a list that's public and you can see who voted or who did. I don't give a damn. I don't like you. I remember you from earlier times. You the reason why there's so many black people locked up. You was in on them policies that got voted for. You was in on that Reagan era bullshit. And Trump, he was just somebody who got paid from it. If we got to talk about these two.
Capitalism. Socialists want to build a society beyond capitalism, one that truly offers the individual freedom from the shackles of precarity and financial insecurity. That means handing the means of production, that is, the means by which capital is produced, over to the people who do the work. A factory is the quintessential example of the means of production. Workers come to the factory, offer their labor to produce goods, and receive a wage for their work. The problem, as seen by socialists, is that this wage is far lower than the actual value of the goods produced. All that surplus value goes straight into the pockets of the executives, people who may never have even stepped foot in the factory. Now, I don't want...
See, that's another thing. They don't even know how the factory runs, but they get all the credit for running the factory. Like Elon Musk. Who cares? You bought Twitter. I don't care. You still need everybody out there to run it. Everybody's all in a panic because he bought Twitter. Just stopped using it. Then he wastes his money. What happened to Vines? You remember Vines? A lot of people don't. But people just stopped using it. And guess what? It died. MySpace. Where's MySpace now? It don't exist. At one point in time, MySpace could have owned Facebook. Speaking of Facebook, what's happening to Facebook? People starting to change tones on that. Anyway, all these billionaires get credited for being so smart because they just played you. That's why they hired all the people they got around. You think Jeff Bezos know anything about building a rocket? All he know how to do is put the damn seatbelt on. Come on, he don't know how to fly no damn rocket. He hired people to do it for him. That's what they do. Hire people to get it for him. People want to be closely associated and rub elbows with millionaires and billionaires, but a lot of these billionaires is phony wise men, if you want to call them. The ones that get credit with doing all the thinking. Like, half these motherfuckers don't even know things about no science.
I want to turn this video into a crash course on Marxist economics. So suffice it to say that we socialists believe that those who do the work should reap the reward.
Exactly.
And honestly, that sounds a lot like the American dream, doesn't it? Work hard, reap the reward.
No, it don't. The American dream don't exist. There's no American dream. Get over that dream. The American dream is like the wool. That's how they make you want to come here with this American dream thing. It ain't no different than England.
Rewards of your labor. So, to sum up, socialists are not Democrats, nor are we liberals. We believe that both parties have failed the American people, and that a new way forward is required. Now, let's get on to why so many young people are becoming socialists. I think a good place to start is the notion of the good old days. For each generation, there's a period of time, usually around high school or college, which is generally considered the best of their lives.
How come when you in the best of your lives, no one ever stops and tells you that you're going to be living the best of your life until after it's over? You be like, damn, that was the best time of my life. Why did that never work out like right now?
My parents' generation, those born in the mid to late 60s, it was the 1980s. Big hair, great music, fast American cars, and generally a booming economy, before the union-busting and reckless free market reforms started to cause problems. Even people my age will say they wish they had been around.
Yo! Them was the days. Damn, that's 82? That must have been when Mario Brother and Donkey Kong came out. I don't know, I think Mario came out a little bit after. That was definitely during the Donkey Kong era, Donkey Kong Pac-Man.
In the 80s. For millennials and now Gen Z, we don't really have a good old days. Many older folks still think of millennials as kids, but the oldest members of my generation are now 40 years old.
That's
the
crazy.
80s were behind them when they entered their formative years, and the 90s were characterized by a sort of suburban malaise. The younger millennials, myself included, might remember a bit of the 90s, the ugly generic cars, the Zoo Books and Reese's Puffs commercials, the enormous home computers, and the ungodly screeching of dial-up internet. But for us, the first real, concrete memories we have are of disaster.
And there's more explosions right now.
Oh, shit. That is right. Damn. That is when they were kids. Damn.
We got an explosion inside.
Just about every millennial, except the very youngest, remembers where they were when they got the news about the World Trade Center. For most of us, it's our first memory of the real world and its problems. The US population was shaken from its decade-long stasis, and things only seemed to get worse from there. Next came the invasion of Iraq under false pretenses. This is where I need to offer my first bit of evidence, though I wish it weren't necessary. The vast majority of people are finally willing to admit that the Iraq War was initiated based on a lie and remains one of the biggest military blunders in US history. There is no longer any argument to be made that we...
So, how is this invasion not a war crime? Like, the way they went about it, Rumsfeld, the mass destruction weapons, all this other stuff. I don't understand how this war crime stuff works.
I've left links to further reading and an excellent podcast on the subject in the description. Young people watched as massive protests failed to steer us away from war, a war that served the purpose of maintaining the decades-long conflict in the Middle East that continues to this day, at the cost of the stability of the entire region and over 1 million lives. Then there was the 07-08
Exactly, like the thing in
financial
Syria.
crash, a crisis of capitalism that claimed the livelihoods of millions of American families.
If you read the Bible,
I
it's
remember
true.
those days vividly. I had never seen my parents so stressed and unhappy. I remember them struggling to sell our house, having lost nearly everything, and they were the lucky ones. They have since managed to regain their footing, but so many others never recovered, and have lived the rest of their lives in poverty and misery, despite playing by the rules their whole lives. The housing crash is a complicated topic, but I've left resources below if you'd like to learn more. The short version is that predatory lenders and greedy bank executives took advantage of the American people, ruined millions of lives, and got bailed out while the normal people suffered. It's been described as a fluke, a once-in-a-lifetime financial crisis. But what young people have begun to realize is that these things are happening with increasing frequency. They're
Yeah,
no
it's not a
longer
fluke.
once-in-a-lifetime events. Heck, we're still limping out of another one. The COVID crash was
About to head
unprecedented
into
in its
another one.
destructiveness. While the wealthy were able to weather the storm just fine, the vast majority of Americans were thrown into precarity. In the United States, healthcare is tied to employment. So when millions of Americans were laid off as businesses were forced to close,
Healthcare
those
went down
people
the
all
window.
suddenly found themselves without a paycheck or the means to see a doctor, something which is rather important in the middle of a pandemic.
I mean,
Without
out the
health
window.
insurance, a visit to the hospital is financially impossible for the average person. When most Americans can't cover a surprise $400 expense, the ambulance ride alone will run you more than twice that amount. It's not uncommon for American hospital stays to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. One man even received a bill for over $1 million when he was hospitalized for COVID.
Damn! How do you do that with a straight face? How do you charge somebody with a straight face? I thought I hit mute on that. How do you charge somebody $1 million with a straight face?
Then there were the evictions. People had no paychecks, so they couldn't pay rent.
And as a landlord, how do you just... This right here is just cold. Like, I mean, if they're a bad tenant, then they're a bad tenant. But if you got somebody who hit a hardship and is actually, man, this is... I'm sure that not everybody's case was the same, but there's some of these that probably that was probably heartless.
And when they couldn't pay rent,
This just
many of
makes
them were
crazy.
evicted, adding to the already desperate homelessness crisis we faced even
Right?
before the pandemic. Despite the obvious national emergency, those in power bickered over the tiniest relief measures imaginable. The checks they finally sent out were too little too late. $1,200 for 6 months
bullshit
of
check.
rent? It wouldn't cover 1 month in most places. Not to mention utilities, groceries, transportation, medication, all the little things that humans need to function. And all of this, the decades of crises, the wars we've started and maintained, the crashes and pandemics our leaders have failed to handle, these are all happening in the richest country in the history of the world. To my generation and the one following us, there were no good old days, just a long and painful decline. Okay, I can guess your objections. That's not unique to you, bad things have always happened. You're right, bad things have always happened. But the frequency with which these things are happening, not just
Is
little blips,
increasing.
major crises, is increasing. This is not controversial or contested by any serious economist or historian. These crises are also occurring in an economic environment which is demonstrably worse than that of our parents or grandparents. Things older generations took for granted, benefits, vacation days, parental leave, pensions, a reasonable salary, these have all been slowly stripped away since the 1980s. The average American now enters the workforce with vastly more debt than any previous generation due to massive education price hikes. We were told growing up that getting a college degree was essential to our success, but we've found that they're increasingly worthless, leaving us with nothing to show for our tremendous debt. This leads us to another objection. This is one I've heard from someone very close to me, and though I doubt they're watching, I hope I can offer a brief explanation to others with the same confusion. For some reason, older people seem to be convinced that the economy and the job market are thriving. For wealthier folks, I imagine this comes from watching the
I doubt they
stock
think
market.
that now.
It should go without saying, but the stock market and the economy are two very different things. If you take 2020, for example, stock prices soared during the pandemic, enriching the already super wealthy to the tune of $1 trillion. This surge in wealth is directly opposed to the tremendous loss of wealth among the rest of the population. As far
Exactly.
as jobs go, I think we need to start at square zero here. The person with whom I was speaking about the state of the economy was not aware of the existence of the gig economy. When you see employment figures, it's not unreasonable to think, oh, that's pretty good. Here's the thing. There are jobs, and then there's gig work. A gig worker is someone who works for a company like Uber, or Lyft, or DoorDash, or any one of the roughly 170 other companies offering the freedom to be your own boss, set your own hours. These gig workers make up 36% of the US workforce.
I do enjoy doing gig work more than I did going to a 9 to 5. Excuse me. I get to go all kind of different neighborhoods and this and that. I like doing that.
Some of them have other jobs, but the vast majority rely entirely on the gig economy for their income. Okay, so what does that mean? For those who are unaware, when you work for one of these companies, say Uber, you are not legally an employee. Because of this, Uber does not have to provide you with healthcare, or car insurance, or benefits, or paid time off, or even a wage. This is tremendously profitable for them. You're doing all the work of an employee, but receiving none of the benefits which, in our parents' and grandparents' generations, would have been expected.
You got to know how to do that stuff yourself. You got to build you a business. That's why I have an LLC now. Doing this gig work, I was able to turn my little thing into an LLC.
To make matters worse, when you drive for Uber, you're putting thousands of miles of wear and tear on your own vehicle.
Make the LLC own it. Got to transfer it to the LLC, make the LLC own it, so it'll be business stuff. And then you got to figure out your next route from there to make it work for you, because everybody's plan is going to be different.
When it inevitably breaks down, Uber won't help you pay for repairs. So all that money you earn driving people around will have to go straight back into fixing your car. The gig economy is slowly cannibalizing traditional work. Companies have seen how lucrative it is not to classify their workers as employees. So when you see those employment figures, remember that 36% of American workers aren't employees at all, but disposable little cogs making far less than other workers and with none of the benefits. And if you take offense at any of this, if you feel like this is some kind of personal attack, please remember I'm not trying to be confrontational here. These are just the facts of the modern American labor market. If you don't believe me, look at the data. And may I suggest as respectfully as possible, ask yourself when it was you last applied for a job. Things have changed dramatically in the last few...
Damn. When is the last time I applied for a job? This is what, 2022? I haven't worked an actual formal job since 2020. January 2020. So that's 2 right there. I was at the past job like 5-6 years, so that's about 7-8 right there. Yeah.
Few years alone, the job market would be unrecognizable to someone who last applied for a job in 1990. Okay, everyone with me so far? Remember, if you're interested to learn more about anything we've discussed, there are resources and citations in the description. Now, we've talked about why young people are fed up with the current system, but why are they attracted to socialism specifically? Proponents of capitalism will say, look, I get we have problems now, but what we have today isn't capitalism, it's corporatism. We need to get back to real capitalism. Let's start there. Here's
I don't think that's the answer either.
If someone dies of cancer, you wouldn't say, well, actually it wasn't cancer, it was stage 4 cancer. That would be silly, right? Stage 4 cancer is just the natural progression of cancer. In the same way, the strain of capitalism we see in America today, whether you want to call it corporatism, cronyism,
it's a strain of
whatever,
cancer.
It's simply the natural progression of capitalism. More and more people are coming to grips with this
starting
fact.
to consume itself
and because
now.
of this, to us, capitalism is no longer an acceptable system.
I look at capitalism like, have you ever seen that movie The Blob, where it just consumes everything around it until it's like starts to like run out of stuff to consume? That's what I view capitalism as.
The simulation 1,000,000 times and you'll get 1,000,000 instances of the same result. Capitalism always trends towards self-destruction. It cannibalizes its own safety net. Runaway deregulation, cost-cutting, streamlining, acquisitions, mergers, accumulation of power in the hands of the few.
Bingo. Accumulation of power. Twitter. Although you could just leave Twitter, think of all that information that Elon Musk now has privy to. All of that personal information, Elon Musk can just go and say, I'll just take a look because I own it. Accumulation of power. Twitter, Elon Musk, all that personal information. Oh yeah, he wants to make everything be all. What did he say? Freedom of speech. Yeah, you use that freedom of speech on a private freaking platform. You keep giving away that information. He already got your personal stuff. I was already considering getting rid of mine. And everything that's connected to it, he has all that information. Power. That's all that was a power grab. Even though you could shut Twitter down by just stop using it, he still got all that information.
This is all inevitable because the core logic of capitalism demands it. What is the one thing that matters within the capitalist framework? Profit. The profit motive drives any change within the system. If something is not profitable, it will not be pursued. This is why socialists will always point out the fact that capitalism cannot solve the problems it creates. Solving problems is not profitable. Providing for your citizens in a pandemic, fixing the homelessness crisis, addressing the fallout from now inevitable climate change, none of these things are profitable, and therefore none of them will be pursued under a capitalist system. So where does that leave us? Rewind to 2015. For many young people, there was no hope. We had bought into the propaganda that there was no alternative. Then, one day, along comes this old guy. Hey, did you hear that some dude is running for president as a socialist? Of course, Bernie Sanders is not actually a socialist. If you were to drop him into an election in just about any European country, he'd be a run-of-the-mill social democrat. But the fact that the word socialism got some primetime coverage was huge.
Social democrat,
Here was a person saying we could fix our problems, that healthcare could be affordable, that plenty of other nations had done it, and so...
I'm sorry, but Bernie is too old to be in the presidency, too. Not Biden, not Bernie. Damn sure not McConnell. Hell to the no. Hell no. We need somebody with different views and ain't old as shit.
So could we. He said that we could address climate change, we could improve our schools, shake the crushing burden of student debt, and have jobs that paid well enough to do more than just survive, but to thrive.
Bernie
To many of us,
but
this
he know
was the
they'll
first time
block
we
the
had
hell out
believed
of
that the
everything he
American
tried to
dream
do.
was actually possible. Now, Bernie's campaign was not the first time socialism had come to America. Despite the capitalist duopoly's best efforts to suppress American history in our schools, a quick Google search will tell you that the US once had a thriving socialist party. We had strong labor groups, unions, and countless socialist organizers who fought for things we take for granted today. The 8-hour workday, the 40-hour workweek, the weekend, child labor laws. These were all socialist initiatives.
I just wanted to read some of these signs. Is that MLK right there up front? That's another reason that made me stop. I wanted to see what some of these signs read. I think so.
But the history of socialism in America is the history of brutal repression and witch hunts.
Yo,
The
man,
Red
it
Scare
is.
propaganda ran deep, and those in power conditioned the American people to...
Remember I was saying they were associating socialism with communism?
turn in their friends and neighbors as suspected communists. McCarthyism is a stain on this nation.
It's called
and
McCarthyism?
that deep-seated fear of the specter of communism never truly went away.
Oh,
Let's
Senator
talk about
McCarthy.
that for a minute. After World War II, the US and the Soviet Union had established themselves as the two dominant world powers.
Yeah, I
One
remember
espoused
that.
a capitalist worldview, the other a communist one. In order to secure its position as the sole world superpower, the US launched a vicious propaganda campaign against the Soviet Union. Their method was incredibly effective. Tie capitalism to the American way of life. Get the average American's morals, his patriotism, his very human nature tangled up with an economic system.
That's that whole bullshit with the Pledge of Allegiance, huh? Ah. It always felt like a cult to me. Like, why do we have to do this every morning? And if you didn't do it, people scowl at you. So you just kind of like, you kind of mumble it. Do I still remember the Pledge of Allegiance? Yeah. Man. That's some South Korea. Some North Korea shit right there.
It worked. The very existence of communism was a threat to all of us. Why, if you're not
That
a
was said in the
capitalist, you're not an
comments,
American.
too.
This propaganda campaign was not the only way the US tried to suppress other economic systems. Anywhere in the world socialist policies were implemented, wherever a budding left-wing government or economy was beginning to blossom, the US intervened
jumped
to
in.
murder it in its cradle. Throughout the 20th century and into the 21st, the United States was involved with scores of coups to overthrow democratically elected socialist governments.
That's
Some of
crazy.
the most well-known are Iran in 1953,
Yup.
where we ousted Prime Minister Mossadegh in favor of the Shah, and Chile in 1973, where we overthrew the democratically elected Allende government and installed General Augusto Pinochet, a vicious right-wing military dictator. More recently, the US was also involved in the coup in Bolivia, which led to the exile of Evo Morales, their socialist president, and the installation of Janine Áñez, an unelected tyrant. When Americans say, socialism doesn't work, just look at X country, I would strongly encourage you to do
That's
a little
'cause they don't
research
want it to
and
work.
see what the US has been up to in that country.
That's crazy.
You might be surprised what you find. So, the origin story
Was it
for
Libya?
most young American socialists goes like
If
this.
I remember right.
We were frustrated by the status quo. Bernie came along and gave us real hope for the first time. We watched the DNC coalesce around an inferior candidate not once, but twice. We lost faith in the Democrats, started learning more about social democracy in other countries, got curious about the difference between social democracy and socialism, and
Yup.
then from there we learned about an entire history of America that simply isn't taught. Not only is it not
So
taught,
ain't.
it's actively suppressed. When your entire life has been one long string of capitalist crises, when we fail time after time to handle the problems capitalism creates, when social democratic and socialist countries around the world rise to those challenges with ease, Vietnam destroying COVID, for example, it's not hard to understand why many Americans think we could do that. And
You know what? Them Vietnamese is tough. Don't fuck around and find out mess with no Vietnamese. They destroyed COVID. They like, yeah, okay, yep, move on. And Vietnamese is tough.
And you know what? We could do that. We have more resources at our disposal than any nation on Earth. We could implement common sense policies today. We could come to terms with the fact that capitalism has outlived its usefulness and try a better system. And
Yeah,
best
I agree.
of all, we wouldn't have the United States coming in to stage coups and sabotage the process. Capitalism does not offer any meaningful theory of change. It's
It's
a
outta here.
system
It's
that demands
it's overstayed
infinite
its
growth
welcome.
on a planet with finite resources. That is impossible. We face challenges that demand real, structural change. Neither the Democrats nor the Republicans are willing to even entertain the idea of change. That leaves us with no recourse under capitalism. We need to move on. Socialists aren't out to steal your freedom. We want to expand everyone's freedom. We should all have the right to economic security, housing, healthcare, and a decent standard of living. We don't want to see our fellow human beings needlessly killed for a war that benefits no one but the rich. We want our country to stop bullying the rest of the world and let other countries try
Man,
new
I'm
things
sick of
and
that.
develop in their own time. We want to end the exploitation of the workers of the world and of the earth itself.
Like, every time you turn around, America's being deployed somewhere or got their fucking nose in somebody's business. I get sick of hearing that shit all the time. It's like, God, will you sit down? Come on, America, will you sit the hell down somewhere? Damn.
That's what socialism is all about. That's what capitalism refuses to offer. And that is why so many young people are becoming socialists. Socialism may finally be regaining popularity
I guess
in the
I'm a
US,
socialist.
but it's certainly not the only
Mostly
place left-wing
socialist.
ideas have a long and proud history. On my channel, I specifically talk about American problems and how socialism can solve them. If you'd like a non-American perspective, I highly recommend you check out Paul Moran's companion video to this one. He's got a great Intro to Socialism series
have to
that's
check that
perfect
out.
for anyone looking to learn more. If you enjoyed this video, consider dropping a like.
Definitely gonna have to check that out. I don't know if I'll do a video about it, but I'm gonna check it out. Yeah. I guess I'm mostly socialist. I'm gonna say about 75% socialist. We'll go 75, maybe 80, something like that, you know. Just because I have nothing else to fight it with, I'm just gonna go 80. I don't want to go full, but I'm gonna go 80. All right, I'm Aquarian OG. I'm OUT. Deuces on the flips. We're gonna have some more videos. Stay tuned.
Cheese special. Cheese special. Cheese special.